Hi everyone and welcome to my Art Journal 2017. This is my February page. As you know, I'm playing catch up, but it's all part of the fun. Who says you have to be on time with your yearly projects? You know what it's like if you're scrapbooking, you're always catching up with your photographs, and I'm catching up with my art journaling. So February is the page that I'm going to be making. All the pages follow the same format. You can see I've got a page, double page spread in the middle, and places for tags and plenty of scrapbooking, so I can record my art journey as well as the journey through this year. So I really hope that you find lots of inspiration in this video and that you play along with me and create a journal of your own. So I'm using a white cardstock base for this particular page because I'm going to keep my colours nice and light. And sorry, when there's lots of white on the screen, it does go a little bit out of focus. The page itself measures 11.5 inches by 7 3/4 inches. So this is the page that will form the double page spread in the centre of this little signature. And I'm going to score that in half at 5 3/4, and this score line will be where I will stitch the little combination of pages into the book when it's finished. I haven't quite worked that out yet, but I'll get to it by the end of the year. So this card is actually 300 GSM, so it's quite thick, so it's going to take plenty of wear and tear with all the products that I will be putting onto it. Now, I had an idea for a romantic page, as February is the month for Valentine's, and it's an excuse to do something quite girly in the colour scheme, and I found all these rose printouts on the internet. So I've literally just printed out some borders and corners, all with a rose theme. I did try to keep them very similar shades of pink. They're not quite the same, but they work quite well in the finished product. So those are printed out on paper, and these are printed out on card, and these are what I will use for the actual scrapbooking tags. So I will mount them back to back, perhaps with another colour in the middle to frame them, to make lots of area for me to be able to add some scrapbooking and memories in with my art journaling. I'll keep these, I might use them, we'll see how we go later on. So I'm going to create a blended background. So this is one of the pages that will form the front pocket, and because this pocket will have the month running along the right hand edge, I'm going to blend from the dark green right through to as light as I can take it by adding white to the green and blending upwards. So this is a horizontal blend, if you like. So my paints are by Decoupage, and the colours are leaf green and white. And I'm using a flat brush because it covers the area quicker and allows you to blend easier while the paint is still wet. So I've just gradually added more and more white to my brush and covered the entire piece of cardstock. So that was the first coat, and pretty much straight away I'm going back over and just darkening things up, but following the same principle, green at the bottom and then gradually adding the white and blending upwards or to the left. So the trick is to, again, as I said, use a flat brush so that you're getting nice wide strokes and adding the white paint to your blend as you move across your page in whichever direction you choose to go. So you don't have to follow this exactly. This is all about getting inspiration for your pages. You might decide that you use this blend effect on an entirely different month. So I really hope that this series just gives you lots and lots of inspiration. And you can see that I've got quite a good ombre effect, and I'm going to do the same on the page that will form the back pocket. So one tag comes or pops out of the pocket in a horizontal direction and one comes out vertically. So this will be the vertical pocket. So I'm starting the blend from the bottom, the short edge with the paper in the portrait, and then doing exactly the same as you've just seen me do, which is go from green to white at the top. So each of these pockets measure 5 and 5/8, so just slightly less than the 5 3/4, so that they won't impact on the actual spine of the double page. So 5 5/8 by 7 3/4 inches. So one was blended horizontally, this one is blended vertically, and then on my middle page I'm going to blend diagonally. So this is quite a quick and easy and it's quite a nice thing to do because you're blending from one colour to the other, and using white is a little bit more forgiving than trying to blend two different colours. So you can see I've put my green strip down the middle on the diagonal, and then I'm going from, or creating the blend on one side first. You can see I'm going quite quickly here. How many pages could I make if I could do it this quickly in real life? And I wouldn't be behind, would I, for the year? And then blending in the bottom corner. So you could use this kind of blend technique to create all sorts of effects. You could sort of blend from a sky to, so for blue to green to give the effect of from going from sky to land or grass. Or you could perhaps go from purple in the middle to a pink if you wanted to. Be careful what colours you try to blend because some of them will go brown. But going from a darker colour to a lighter colour by adding white or cream gives you a lovely ombre effect. Now I'm going to do a little bit of decoupage to get my roses onto my design. And you can see I managed to find some borders featuring roses. This was a sort of free image that was on Google, so I just looked up roses and this one popped up and it was free to use, so I just popped it on a page in Word and printed it out. I just scaled it to the size that I thought was going to fit the 2 pages or the 3 pages that I will be working on. So I kind of envisaged this as a little border across the top of the 2, I'm going to call them tag pages. So one which will go on the front of the layout and one which will go on the back. I'm literally just cutting them out, not being too fussy, and I will just overlap one over the other and create a little rose border across the top of the page. So whatever I'm doing in the middle of my pages will be mimicked on the front and back tag pages. And then I'll use some of the same colours and ideas to create the tags which I will scrapbook on that will sit inside these pockets. Perhaps they should be called pocket pages. So I'm just using a little bit of PVA glue. You could use matte medium or a gloss medium if you like the gloss look, and I'm just making sure that they're stuck down nicely to my page. The reason I'm not using matte medium is because I've run out and I need to get some more. And then I'm going to do exactly the same across the top of the horizontal page. I'm going to have to do a little bit of extending of the corners to go all the way across the top because they're a little bit short. As you can see, so I need a little piece to go in the middle. So I'm just going to cut out this corner section, and the reason I did this was because I wanted them to be a little bit lower than if I'd have used the edges of the design. So as it happened, I needed a little tiny bit. So gluing that into place. And then finishing off on the opposite corner. So I've got roses across the two of my pocket pages, and then I'm going to use a bigger rose corner on the actual layout itself. So again, I'm just cutting around the image, ready to decoupage them onto my painted page. You can see how lovely that pink looks against the green, and it's very romantic. Now, as this is going to be a Valentine's page, I like the combination of the roses and the romance. I have to say though, I'm not really very partial to red roses, which are quite traditional for Valentine's Day. Probably my favourite rose is yellow. And then I thought I'd use a couple of these lovely petals just as little extra additions down the sides of the page. So I'm just cutting out a few of those. And then adding them as a little extra embellishment to the edges of the page. So again, using my PVA glue to stick them in place. So the next thing that I wanted to do was seal the image, and as I said, I've run out of matte medium, so I'm going to be using a clear gesso. This one's by Prima from the Art Basics range, and I'm going to go right over the whole page with the gesso, and it will dry clear. So I'm just making sure my brush is clean, no more green paint, and that it is quite dry, so I don't add any water to the gesso itself. And the reason I don't want it too wet or to overwork this is because this is an inkjet printed image, and I don't want to overwork the image and start to bleed the ink from the image across the work and out of the image itself. So I'm working quite quickly. You might get a little bit of ink transference. I'm noticing a little tiny bit of the pink is coming off the image, but not too much. And as I said, I'm working quite quickly right across the whole page, and that will act as a seal over that image so that I can carry on working over it. You can see it looks a little bit milky, but once it's dry, it will be clear. And I'm going to do exactly the same on the pocket pages front and back. And then I'm going to use my heat gun to dry the pages ready for the next layer. And I think you could easily see on camera how clear that actually ended up once it was all dry. As usual with me, I just thought things were just a little bit too bright, so I'm going to make a wash. You can use gesso or you can use your white acrylic. I'm going to use the white acrylic, and I've just watered it down so it's milky, and just brushing over the whole piece, which just lightens everything ever so slightly, and I always feel that it brings everything together. So you might like it bright, you might want to miss out this step, but I'm just going to dull things down a little bit, make it a little bit misty with the addition of a really milky coat of the white acrylic. And as I said, and you'll have seen me do this before, I can do the same, exactly the same, get exactly the same effect by watering down a white gesso. Because I've sealed it already with the clear gesso, I don't need to be quite so careful working over the images. And once again, make sure everything is dry. So my next layer is going to be some generous splattering. So again, with the milky consistency of the acrylic paint, I'm using a fan brush, tapping it against my finger and getting plenty of snowy splatter all over my work so far. And then I want to do exactly the same with the green again, so I'm watering it down, drying off the white splatter first, and then coming in with the green. It's almost like pebble dashing your paper, because I'm not just going for a little bit of splatter, I want plenty on there. I want it to be obvious and I want it to just add texture. And then last but not least, I had to go and find a pink to match the roses. And first attempt, I was a little bit too much on my brush, so I've just blotted that off with some kitchen roll. And I won't give you the name of this colour because this paint is so ancient, I really had to revive it. But it was the nearest pink that I had to the shade of roses. So that's how you can pick yours. And of course, you don't have to use roses, you could use any kind of flower to add some decoupage interest to your art journal pages. So everything's been splattered with lots of texture and it's all nice and dry, ready for the next step. And I'm going to frame the artwork with my Pitt pen. So I've picked a green that goes with the green paint that I used, and I'm just creating a little frame all the way around the work. So this is a Faber-Castell Pitt pen, a big brush marker, and it is an Indian ink marker that's permanent when it's dry. I've just noticed I've got change of sleeves, so I obviously did this over a couple of days, and we've been having some really strange weather in the UK. You can't guarantee from one day to the next whether it's going to be lovely, sunny and warm, or whether it's going to be cold, and it's a bit chillier here today. Now I was just testing here whether I wanted to sketch around all of my roses, and I decided I actually didn't like that, so I'm thinking of other things. So that was just a little experiment in between making this frame. So as I was saying, this is an Indian ink pen and it's permanent when it's dry, but whilst it is wet you can smudge it and smooth it out a little, so long as the work that you're applying it onto has been sealed. And I have, in effect, with the gesso and the, or not the gesso, the acrylic paints and the clear gesso, sealed my work, so I can just smudge this out ever so with my fingertip whilst it is still drying. Now you will see I changed my mind on this a little bit because of a change of the idea that I wanted for the frame. So this is the beginning of the frame on this work. So whatever I do on the centre pages, I'm going to do on the two front and back pocket pages. So because this is all about romance and Valentine's, I've printed out some pictures of me and my hubby over the years, some of the ones I actually like. The digital age is brilliant for that, except I do tend to be a little bit, what shall I call myself, picky about photographs of myself, and so they don't end up being very many that I actually like. But these are a few of me and hubby over the years, and I've printed them out in black and white, and I'm going to cut heart shapes out of my page and pop these little pictures in behind. So as you can see, I've also printed out some of the other photographs that I'll be using on the tags and the back page of this signature. So these are sort of my, or will be, the memories from February. Did I say March earlier? I meant February if I did. I've suddenly got the feeling that I've said March somewhere along the line on this video. And I'm just thinking of where I'm going to place these photographs. I'm also going to include a couple of verses from some old Valentine's cards that I've sent to hubby over the years, and they will be the words on this journal page. I decided to use a couple of rubber dance stamps with this. I want to write the word love in the background, and you can see I've used this alphabet stamp set from Rubber Dance in order to do that. And I'm also going to be using these hearts. So if you want to get your hands on these, the alphabet is called Alphabet Uno, and the heart stamp set is called I Heart Art, and they're both from Rubber Dance, a great stamp company in Norway, and the lovely Bibby will send them over to you. I'll leave the link in the description box below, and you can pop over there and order these. They're great for your art journaling, your scrapbooking, great for putting titles onto things, as well as these gorgeous hearts are definitely arty themed. So these look like scribble hearts, I think, and I've used one which is a little bit less scribbly than the other, and I'm going to use them both to add more interest into my background. So I'm starting off using the less scribbly heart, and this is being stamped with the Mowed Lawn Distress ink, and you can see I'm stamping it first onto my scrap paper, and then I'm stamping it onto my design so that it's not too dark. So just a lovely faint suggestion of hearts across that centre section of the page, and then I'm going to do exactly the same on these two pieces. So using the Distress ink Mowed Lawn and using the second generation stamp, and I'm just twisting and turning the stamp slightly and keeping the stamped area, and, or should I say, I'm not stamping over the roses, that would be easier to explain that way around. So the next layer in my design is going to be the word love, and I'm using my acrylic paint as an ink. Just testing it there. I've got a piece of foam that I'm just lightly tapping the ink over my stamp. I'm being careful not to overload the stamp with paint, and then I'm stamping it randomly in exactly the same area as I stamped the hearts. So just randomly twisting the stamp and stamping the word love over this centre section. So definitely building up into a romantic background now. And then again, I'm going to do exactly the same technique using the acrylic paint and stamping over the pocket pages. So just remember, don't overload your stamp with ink, and make sure you give it a really good clean straight after you finish. Don't let the paint dry on your stamp or you will spoil your stamp. So I just used a baby wipe to clean mine, but you could just run it straight under a tap with a sort of a nail brush or something similar, just to get the paint out of all the indentations on the stamp. So I use my baby wipe first to get the worst off, and then for the bits that I couldn't quite get to with baby wipe, I took a wet brush and just rubbed it right around all those little nooks and crannies, and then again blotted it off with a bit of kitchen roll and finished off with the baby wipe. So nice and clean and ready to put away. And again, from the I Heart Art stamp set from Rubber Dance, I'm going to be using this time the heart that's a little bit more scribbly to create a frame and an area to cut out for each of my pictures. So I'm just popping the pictures where I want them and just lightly marking where they will sit with a pencil so I know where to stamp. So I'm going to do some white embossing next. So you can see I'm keeping all my colours nice and light. And then I'm going to be using this more scribbly stamp, and I'm going to be using a Versamark ink pad and some white embossing powder. And again, this embossing powder is really old, so I won't bother giving you the details. Any white embossing powder will do the trick. So I'm using a Versamark ink pad, so this is like a sticky ink, ready to use your embossing powder. So I'm stamping the main body of the heart where the picture will go, because this is the area that I'm going to cut out. And I'm using some white embossing powder. I've got my paper underneath to catch any excess. And then I'm going to heat emboss the heart. So the trick with the heat embossing is to move your heat gun as soon as the embossing powder melts. Don't over melt your embossing powder. That's a common trick. If it goes dull rather than glossy, 9 times out of 10 you have overheated it, particularly if it looks like it's really flattened into the paper. It almost makes a grease mark if you go too overboard with your heat gun. So once your heat gun is warm, in particular, the minute you can see it start to change, move it around the image. Don't linger too long in one place. So you can see how lovely this scribbly heart is. Shame to cut out that centre section, really. So again, I've got 4 of these in total. Now, because I'm going to cut the centre section of these hearts away, I decided to add an extra element. So I'm using a pen this one's by Ranger, but I believe Versamark do their own, and I'm just drawing in some lines as if some of this, let's call these hearts tangles of string. I'm just drawing away some of those strings or tangles with a pen and white embossing them exactly the same way as you would your stamped image. So in effect, I'm creating some extra curly tendrils coming out of those existing stamped images. So the pen itself is just literally a pen, like a felt pen, exactly the same as the pens that you use for drawing with, except they're filled with this sticky ink rather than the colours that you might use from a felt tipped pen. So drawing and heat embossing in exactly the same way, and I will be doing that on all of the hearts, but I just thought I would see that this design is going to work, and I'm going to cut out one of those heart centres first to make sure that this is going to look nice with the pictures behind. So I've just erased the actual guide marks that I made with my pencil, and now I'm going to freehand draw or remove a heart shape from the centre of what will become a heart-shaped frame once I've finished. So first of all I thought I might leave little doors, but I decided I didn't like the doors very much, so you can see how I'm going to get my little faces poking out from underneath the heart. And I have decided I'm actually going to remove the actual doors. So I'm literally going to have heart-shaped holes. So make sure your knife is nice and sharp, and if you don't quite get it right the first time, you can remove a little bit, but bear in mind the size of your photograph, and you obviously don't want to cut away too much so that you can't cover it up with your photograph underneath. So I did have a little bit of problem with two of my photographs not being quite big enough, so I just reprinted them slightly bigger. I uncropped them a little bit so that the outside edge was bigger, and that allowed me to stick them behind these little apertures without having any holes that weren't covered by the photograph. So if you don't want to use photographs, you could quite easily perhaps put some more of those roses behind these apertures if you wanted to. So I'm back to adding some more curly whirly bits, extra additions to these hearts with the pen and some more white embossing. And then I'm going to attach each one of my photographs behind the little apertures. So because I've made these almost perfect, I'm just making sure that I'm not going to get glue all over my photograph as I pop these behind. So I'm just adding a little bit of glue right around, not too much glue but enough to seal the edges. And then I'm just manoeuvring the aperture so there are no gaps and then sticking it down. And I'm going to do the same for all four photographs, so just finding the best photographs to use in which aperture. But as I said, once I've stuck down two, I will reprint two of them in order to be able to finish this off. So a little bit of glue all the way around the edge, and then trying to remember which way around I had it so that I can see us peeking through. And I think that's about right. And then just be a little bit careful when you press it down that you don't smudge the glue onto your photograph or your image. So I went rooting through my husband's keepsake drawer, and he had a couple of Valentine's cards from me in his drawer, and I'm quite fond of writing little verses in the Valentine's cards that I give him, and I thought I would capture some of those on the front of this, or on this little art journal layout. So it's all about capturing memories in your art, and I had a little play with how I was going to do this. So you can see I've already done one verse, or one part of a verse. So I'm taking actually a verse from one poem and a verse from another, and I liked them both, so I thought I would use them both. So you can see I'm making a background so it's not quite so busy when I write with my pen. And I'm using some of that green paint, and this green paint is a little bit transparent, so I'm going to do a couple of layers. And again, I'm using a flat brush. This one's about a 1/2 inch brush, and using the fact that the brush gives you a nice wide line in order to create this little area for me to write. So I'm using my heat gun to dry things in between. And then I've added a little bit of white. You can see I'm not going quite to the edge, so I get a little bit slightly darker edge. And then I'm using an embossing tool with a small end and dipping it into my paint and using it as a dotting tool, and this created a nice light frame to lift and edge these little journaling spots on my journaling page. And then once that's nice and dry, I can write the rest of the poem. And make sure it's nice and dry, and I mean, you could use a black pen if you wanted to, but I'm going to be using white because I'm keeping this nice and light. Now this pen is water-based and I wasn't quite sure how I was going to fit this in, so I scribbled the words in first, and then so I just got a rough idea of how my spacing was going to go, and then just wiped over it with a baby wipe, which again lightened that area a little bit by spreading that ink about, but it got rid of it all. So if I make a mistake, I know that I can rub it out, and then I'm finishing off that verse of the poem. And just going over a couple of the letters that needed to be a little bit brighter. And so the whole poem reads, or the 2 verses reads, "This Valentine was made with love and was sent with a butterfly's kiss attached to Cupid's arrow so that it cannot miss." How slushy is that? So moving on to my second verse, this time I'm just creating a little pink journaling spot exactly the same way as I did the green one. Now it was at this point when I was doing this dotty border, which I quite liked, I decided I wanted to frame the whole page with a dotty border, which is why I then went and made the border a little bit thicker so that I could do that. So this time I'm using paint rather than my pen, and I'm just brushing along the edge of the page, just touching my brush roughly about 1/8 of an inch in from the edge of the page. Almost looks like grass. I'm not trying to get a straight edge, I'm just using the bristles of the brush so it looks a little bit jaggedy, which hides any imperfections, so you're doing it imperfect on purpose. And then allowing that to dry before going around again and making a dotty border. So as well as creating the dotty border, I'm also dotting around the edges of my rose images. So I went a little bit dotty crazy, as you can see, but I liked the look. I'm also adding a couple of dots to fade out the ends of my swirly lines. So I'm loading up the end of the embossing tool by dipping it in the paint, and then I'm managing to create about 4 dots before I have to reload. And doing it this way means that some of your dots are slightly bigger, fading to slightly smaller as the paint runs out, which also adds to the charm of this dotted border, the fact that all the dots are not exactly the same. And then it's on to writing that final verse, which came from a different Valentine's card. "Words alone cannot convey how much you mean to me, so let this token of my love express it visually." So I've managed to capture in my February page all the romance of Valentine's Day, as well as capturing some memories of the poems that I have written to my husband over the years. Because the back side of this page will become a pocket, I needed to cover over the photographs to make it smooth so that they don't get caught on the tags as they go in and out. So I'm just using some scrap paper. I didn't use card because I didn't want it to get too thick, as I'm going to add another layer of card anyway, plus the tag. And I've just cut these slightly smaller than the page itself. And you can see they're just scrap pieces of paper because they're not going to show, they're just going to cover up the edges of those photographs so they don't stick on the tags. So using PVA glue and covering over the inside of or what would be the inside of the pockets. So I decided that I wanted the word February, which will run along the bottom of my pockets, my horizontal pockets, to be in this gorgeous rose print. So again, this is another paper print, and I'm going to be using the white embossing to create my letters. So using the same alphabet and heat embossing the letters. It doesn't matter which order you do this in at this stage, just so you end up, or that you end up with the right letters, remembering how to spell February. And carefully cutting all of the letters out. So you can see that how pretty these are going to look on the green background. So I've got all of my letters, and now I am just looking at the spacing because I want to stamp the word February in or onto the page to create a shadow. So this time I do have to make sure my letters are lined up, and I don't mount my rubber dance stamps because I just never felt that they've needed it. They're so nicely or deeply etched that I've very, very rarely, unless it's a really big stamp, need to use anything other than a piece of foam to stamp onto if I have any difficulty with the image. And to be honest, that's very, very rare. So I'm literally lining up my letters, remembering to do it backwards, give it a little test on a piece of scrap paper. And I decided, rather than do it in the permanent ink, which I nearly did there, I'm going to use the distress ink, and that way, as you will see, I didn't quite get it right the first time round, so I wanted to leave this in not quite right, so I'm going to rub that out, and I'm going to put my letters a little bit closer together. And then while the glue is wet, you can move your letters around, and I just used a lolly stick to make sure that they lined up. So I've got Febru and then the ARY to finish, and I'm stamping this. I didn't realise I was using the wrong ink, but I realised here, and I just noticed it wasn't the right colour round about now, and I'm now using the Mowed Lawn. So I'm just squishing a bit of the ink onto my acrylic block and using it exactly like a water paint to fill in my letters, which will become the shadow for the rose letters that we've already cut out. I could leave it like this, it looks quite nice with even with the different colour edge. In fact, that sort of adds to it. And then I'm just going to let that dry before I stick my letters into place. I decided to just like it a little bit darker, so once that ink was dry, I'm just going over with a second layer of the Mowed Lawn Distress ink. And then I can stick the letters, so I'm just moving slightly to the left and up to show the shadow. So removing the middle bit of the E, so slightly to the left and up. So move in the same direction with all of your letters and you will create that shadow effect. You could go down and to the right if you wanted to. Just as long as you move them more or less the same amount and in the same direction, you will get that lovely shadow effect. So February. So again, if you wanted to, you could use that page for extra journaling, but I like it as it is because it shows the background that we've done on our design. So the next thing we want to do is attach the pockets. And I've cut some 1-inch strips of the green cardstock that I've been using on the pages or the tags that you will see at the end of this video, because this matches the colour scheme that I've been using on this page. And I'm scoring them in half at 1/2 inch. So they're 1 inch strips scored and folded in half at 1/2 inch. And then we're going to create the joining strips to make our pockets. So make sure the opening of your double page spread is on your right, and then cut 2 strips for the top and bottom edges, and cut the strips so they're just slightly short of the top and bottom of the page. And when you stick them down with the opening inwards, you're going to again leave just about 1/16 of an inch gap along the edge of your page. And you're going to do that on the top and the bottom, and you can see I mitered the edge, which will be the edge on the left hand side, and I will do the same with the bottom strips. So I'm creating a U shape with my green strips. I'm not being too fussy that these miters are exact, just so long as they're near enough. And then again, and just be a little bit careful that you don't overdo it on the glue so that it spreads out and closes your strip, because this is going to join to the top part of the pocket, and obviously you don't want them to be glued together because you want your tag to be able to slide into this area. So we've got a horizontal, and now we're going for the vertical. So we're going to create a U shape. Again, I'm going to cut a miter at the bottom edge, and you can see how I'm just coming in from the top and the bottom and the edge of the page. And then you cut your final strip just to fill in your U shape. And then we're ready to attach the pocket pages. So making sure that I haven't glued those closed, and you can see this is going to sit on the top and we'll create our pocket. So again, being careful with your glue, you don't want too much that it all squidges and closes your pocket up as it dries. And then spend a little bit of time lining everything up. You want your top and bottom edges to match and your right hand edge to match, and you will see that the page just reveals that folded edge slightly. You don't want it to overlap the folded edge. So spend a bit of time making the open edges match up as well as the top and bottom to create your first pocket. You can see there. And then you're going to do exactly the same on the vertical pocket. And this is where you'll see my first bit of scrapbooking. And obviously I chose to pick one of my pictures, one of the pictures of me and hubby, taken a couple of years ago, probably about, I want to say 5, but it might be slightly more than that years ago. And the fact that this year I've documented was our 35th Valentine year. And I haven't over embellished the page. Obviously I don't want everything to get too thick, but I've used some glittery letters to create the title at the top of the page, and I've stamped my little bit of journaling. So you can see we've got a double page spread in the middle, we've got the month recorded on the front and some scrapbooking on the back. I've also created my tags, which I will talk you through. Be some photos at the end that you can pause on to get the full effect. So I used the rosed paper in the background, and I've sandwiched it or framed it with the green and used the same dotty border throughout, so same technique. And I've mimicked the way of creating the journal spots to add the journaling to these pages. This was a little trip that we took to a very old house that had been closed for 200 years, and it's great because they opened it up and left it exactly how it was, how they found it, with all the treasures. And I have to say that the people that had lived there before in Cork Abbey were hoarders, and they had some beautiful old treasures that we had the pleasure of looking through one afternoon in February. And this was my other February memory. We like to go and find new tea shops, and this was one that had a particularly gorgeous display of macaroons, and I decided to journal about that. And the really important thing that happened was that our youngest has turned 18 in February, and these are some pictures of him throughout the years to document that happened in 2017. So you can see this really is a great way to be able to keep your art in your art journal pages and to document your life throughout the year, and also keep a record of your adventures in your art. So I really hope I've just managed to stick this together after telling you not to. And I really hope that inspires you to create a journal of your own. You don't have to start at the beginning of the year. You can go back and look at your photographs. It really doesn't matter, because that's what I'm doing anyway. Much as my plan was to be really super organised, everything has gone against me. But I'm playing catch up, and you can be sure by the end of the year we're going to have a gorgeous journal, or the beginning of next year, more likely. So I'm just gluing that down, ready to pop the tag back in the pocket. And you can see that the edge that we'll attach this with isn't impacted by these pockets. So just making sure this goes in without sticking in. Just be a little bit careful because of the glue. And you can see how that looks when both tags are in place. So I've got my February signature and my January signature ready to go. So completely different adventures in the art, two totally different looks. One nice and frosty looking for January, and then this romantic look for February. So I really hope you play along with me, and that if you enjoyed this tutorial, don't forget to give me the thumbs up and to share it with your friends, because I'd like to get as many people playing along as possible, and I look forward to seeing what you create. And just so that we can share together, I have created a Google+ page, so a community called Art Journal 2017, which you are more than welcome to join, either to keep an eye on the videos when they crop up, or to look at the photographs in still form without having to pause the video, or to add your photographs and share with the rest of us. I really hope that you play along. I look forward to seeing some journal pages soon. I know this is just the beginning, but I have got 5 members already, so that's cool. And I've just put the first post up for the January pages. So all the links that you need to be able to share your work with us or with me will be down below this post. So I look forward to seeing you join over there, and hopefully look forward to seeing some of your artwork soon. Until next time, don't forget to hit the share button, the like button, the subscribe button if you haven't already, and thank you for watching. So click on this link if you want to see the January page for this Art Journal 2017. And if you want to see what I got up to in 2016, this is the art journal that I created based on Tim Holtz's 12 tags of 2016. Click on this link if you want to see what the surprise is in this, what I call a surprise package card, and you can find out how to make this by popping over to my Etsy shop by clicking on this link, where you can find out how to make the surprise package, or buy the workshop to show you how to make the surprise package as well as this. perhaps you might want to make this. It's a pyramid. It has a mini in the bottom. You can decorate it in any style that you like. You can use it to commemorate a special occasion. This is a very girly version, and the beauty is it opens up and has a surprise within. You can put any kind of thing in there, and there's lots of ideas on the workshop how to decorate this. So you'll get a link to all the workshops that will show you how to make this project, as well as a printout that's got all the dimensions and hints and tips on how to put this project together. So you'll be able to craft along with me to make special keepsakes for your loved ones in a style which best suits them. So I hope you pop along and have a look.